What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be breaking down parts of the quarterly report that Six Flags released a few days ago. This quarterly report was released on the website, and it is easily accessible by the public. It's really easy to find. It basically gives a breakdown of how the company is doing in terms of finances, attendance, earnings, stuff like that. Again, it's easily accessible. You guys can find it. And everything that I talk about here, of course, is in proportion. Uh, the stuff that I talk about in this video is not necessarily cause for panic, but I think at the same time, I think the stuff that I mentioned here has importance in the future, as things could get worse than what they are right now if things don't change. I think most of the stuff in here is kind of parallel to what I talked about last video with how the Cedar Fair legacy parks weren't getting uh, very many benefits at all compared to the Six Flags legacy parks. I think that theme remains mostly the same in this report, and overall, I think if things don't change in the future, then this is going to become much more magnified. This quarterly report that they release is mainly comparing the numbers that they got to last year's second quarter report. And I'm going to go through the report in order. I'm not going to talk about every single thing in the report, but I'm going to talk about the things that I find that stand out the most. So, with that being said, the first big thing that I found was the attendance numbers at the top of the report under the second quarter 2025 results. The combined attendance this second quarter was at 14.2 million guests. This is down 9% or 1.4 million compared to the second quarter last year. So, right off the bat, we know that they have lost visitors overall compared to last year. Um, and uh, we don't I mean there's a lot of things that it can be blamed on, and they kind of get into the specifics a little later, but right off the bat we know that they lost visitors, and I think it's pretty clear that they understand that that's the reality that they're dealing with. The last bullet point on that list also mentions the active pass base, which basically I think talks about the season passes that was sold this year, and they have sold 6.7 million units, which is down 8% compared to last year for both Six Flags and Cedar Fair Legacy Parks. And I think this one in particular has a direct relationship with the lost visitors. I think this is just because they lost visitors mainly. And honestly, it's just one of those stats that are kind of uh, don't really have much explanation other than the fact that they lost visitors. And then next on the list, there is a big paragraph talking about the weather impact. It says here that there were prolonged periods of rain, extreme temperatures, and severe storms, and that these impacted park operations and sales during the year. And I agree that the weather has been a little more uncooperative this year than it has been in past years. However, I think later in the report, you guys might find that the the weather gets a little bit blown out of proportion. I'm going to talk about that later. But this whole paragraph talks about how the weather basically messed with their operations. It even mentions that the combined attendance over the final 6 weeks of the quarter was down 12% compared to the same time last year, and that there were 49 days in which certain parks were forced to close entirely. So, again, I'm going to talk about my opinion on what claim they're making here later, uh, but it's just it's something to keep in mind. I think the weather this year has been an issue, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. So, as you scroll down, uh, now, as we get deeper into the report, they talk about the weather again in the management commentary. And then when I get to the financial results for the second quarter, the first thing I'm going to start with is the operating days. The big thing that sticks out to me in this particular section of the list is that there are 37 more days of operation that Legacy Six Flags Parks had in the second quarter of 2024. On the other hand, the Legacy Cedar Fair Parks had 34 fewer operating days in the second quarter. So we know straight off this stat that Cedar Fair parks are definitely closed more than Six Flags parks. When you go down to the attendance, it says that there was a 5.6 million visitor increase. and that this number is offset by 700,000 fewer visits at legacy Cedar Fair parks. And again, the message here is that Cedar Fair parks aren't doing as well as Six Flags parks. And ultimately, what this says is that it's because of the weather patterns, particularly in the Midwest, and then the fewer operating days in the operating days with lower crowds. With these numbers, it shows that it's rather kind of startling. It's not a particularly good situation for Cedar Fair parks at this point. The next thing they mention here is the out of park revenues, in which $15 million contributed by the legacy Six Flags operations were offset by $4 million in out of park revenues from Cedar Fair legacy operations. Now, the report here says that this is because of the decline in revenue from Cedar Point properties, which is a result of the inclement weather during that time. Next on this list is the adjusted EBITDA, which is basically just the earnings before interest and taxes. And here it says that this included $62 million from legacy Six Flags operations during the 3 month period and a $25 million decrease from legacy Cedar Fair operations. Now, the way that they justify this is pretty similar to how they already justified the other things in the report, saying that due to the decreases in attendance and revenues, this is happening. And this reflects the fewer operating days in the period and a smaller season pass base and the impact of bad weather, which I talked about throughout the whole video so far. So again, they're using the same reason to justify the reason why they're not earning as much money as they should. The final thing that stands out to me on this list is the deferred revenues. Now, on this, it says that $181 million of deferred revenues at legacy Six Flags parks were obtained as of June 29, 2025. These were offset by $8 million or a 3% decrease in deferred revenues at legacy Cedar Fair parks. And again, they say that this happens because of the decline of season passes and related all season products, which it doesn't say in this report, but I could imagine if they wanted a reason to justify why this is happening, it's because of something related to the weather and they're not bringing in as many guests, which is mentioned pretty much throughout the whole report. Now, the thing that I keep seeing in this report is that they keep blaming the weather for everything that's happening, including smaller attendance, a smaller season pass base, and it's making everything go sideways. So, in my opinion, the thing is, again, I talked about this at the beginning of the video. The weather has been not the most normal this year, I will agree, but the weather has been mainly the same type of thing for the past few years, and that includes the hot stretches when the temperatures are really high, the stretches of severe weather that go to the Midwest, in the dry stretches of summer. That has happened throughout all the summers in the past few years. So I think for Six Flags to come out and straight up say the weather is the reason why everything here is happening is a little bit of an excuse, at least the way I view it. And the thing is, they're actually getting smaller numbers than they expected. So if they're getting smaller numbers than they expected, then why are they having trouble at the parks serving guests and they don't have enough staff to serve all the guests that still go to the parks, even though these numbers are smaller than they expected? If these numbers were smaller than they expected, then they should have everything that they need to serve the guests that come to the parks. But it's been made clear in the experiences at the parks that they have not had enough staff to do that. And what I'm trying to say is it all goes back to the layoffs, because the layoffs made everything go upside down. And they're not going to mention that in this report here, but the layoffs are causing things to happen. The layoffs are causing poor service quality, which in turn is making people not want to go back to these parks. And even if they've been coming to the parks for years, they may think that it's not worth it because it's not as good quality as it was in the past. So I think they're failing to mention that these layoffs may be having bigger consequence than what they intended them to have. But I think it's just kind of weak for Six Flags to mention the weather and then call it a day. because in reality, it's not just the weather that's causing this. It's everything that they're doing within the company, including the layoffs, the restructuring. If you pull up a map of the Six Flags and Cedar Fair parks within the company, the parks that are found in the Midwest are Kings Island, Cedar Point, Worlds of Fun, Valley Fair, and Six Flags Great America. Those are the big parks found in the Midwest, and there's also Six Flags St. Louis mixed in there. Those are the big parks, the main parks found in the Midwest. Now, I'm not going to deny there are more Cedar Fair parks in there than Six Flags parks, but the two of the top parks in the chain, Kings Island and Cedar Point, which are legacy Cedar Fair parks, those two big parks make up the biggest profits on the Cedar Fair side of things, at least from what I can gather. And those parks are not doing bad because of the weather. If they're going to talk about the bad weather in the Midwest, they're talking about areas up in Minnesota, in Missouri, and Illinois, those areas. And there's not, and over there, there's parks over there, but those parks are not nearly as big as Cedar Point and Kings Island. Personally, I feel like the weather is kind of an excuse for what when they should actually be talking about the layoffs and the fact that they're changing the way that they're doing things is the reason why things are not going as well as they should be. I think that if they said something along the lines of that, I think I would have had an easier time digesting what they're saying. But right now, I just think they're trying to hide from the true reality that they're not doing so well because of decisions that they have made. And all this comes off of as Richard Zimmerman, the CEO of Six Flags, said he was going to step down by the end of the year. And all this is kind of creating chaos within the company. And Six Flags has said that they have a procedure in place to get a new CEO. Uh, but I truly think, other than maybe improved relationships with companies like Intamin, who fell off with Cedar Point during the Top Thrill 2 project, I truly think a new CEO is truly not going to make things better, at least not initially. I think things are going to get worse before they get better. But as like I always say, we'll have to wait and see what happens. I certainly hope this is not an indication of future things to come. I hope things get better across the board. And yeah, so that's gonna do it for my thoughts on the report that Six Flags released. If you guys have any opinions or disagree with me on anything, feel free to leave any comments in the section below. And other than that, that's all I got. We'll see you guys in the next video, and yeah.